On today's episode, I begin a wide-ranging conversation with Dov Kelemer. Dov has been in the business since he was a kid, and he's really one of the guys that's tied a lot of different divergent threads of the collector community together. In this first episode, we're going to look at how he got into the business from a very early age, starting with candy, not surprisingly, and then moving into comics, baseball cards, and eventually toys. And it's a really interesting journey, and Dov has a lot of things that I think really talk about how these hobbies sort of suck you in and never let you go. So take it away. Here comes the interview. Hello, Dov.
Hi.
I'm here with Dov. So you are fairly complex in what it is you do, and you've gone through a lot of phases. What it How would you describe what you're up to right now?
I guess what I've done is always sort of the same in that um, I sell toys, but it's the manner in which and the method that has constantly changed and evolved. I've sold other things, I've done other things, but really what it mostly comes down to is selling toys or some variation thereof.
And do you sell toys so that you can buy toys?
I think that's how it started. Um, it's not where I saw my life going. Uh, it, it, it was just very easy for me. I started really selling stuff in elementary school. Um,
Okay.
I grew up right off of near Melrose and Fairfax,
Oh, okay.
and right down the street was this place, a candy store called Heaven, which is where Fred Siegel is right now. Or it was in Fred Siegel. I don't know what a pixie stick was a nickel. So I could go in there, buy $5 worth of pixie sticks for a nickel, and I would sell them for a dime the next day, and I would turn my $5 into $10 with very little effort, and that was amazing to me. Um, and yeah, sure, I wanted, you know, I had very few resources as a child, and not a lot of people that like indulged any kind of like, I don't know, childhood. uh I don't know, it just, I don't want to say my parents didn't care. They cared, they loved me, they provided everything that, but buying you toys and, comic books were definitely like forbidden. Like my mom had probably read a story in the 50s about EC comics and the horror, the pre-code comics, and decided that they're bad language. And it's funny because as I went and figured out like who Dr. Frederick Wortham was, and that whole court case, and then
Yeah.
and you read about it, you read the things he said about comics, and then I realized that in the 70s, like, and early 80s, those were the things that my mom was like regurgitating back to me, like those same things.
You were living the Frederick. Okay.
It's like comic books, like those, they use bad language, and there's, it's like, because she just heard this thing and she's just trying to protect her kid. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Sure, there were adult comics at the time, but by the time I was 13, then I was, hooked on comics, and I just said, I'll keep them in my dad's house. Like, you don't need to, you don't need to worry about it. And then she finally came around, like, but it took some convincing. Um, how do we get on the subject? So I was always
Well, let's not jump too far forward. The
okay.
pixie sticks.
Yeah.
So you're doing the pixie sticks business,
Hmm.
and how long do you think did you branch out into other candies, or was it just pixie sticks? And when did that start evolving into something different?
Well, we were all collecting comics and baseball cards at the time,
Okay.
even Garbage Pail Kids, Wacky Packages. So there was always buying and selling, bartering and trading. Like that was just something that was constantly happening. Um, the Pixie Sticks went away pretty quickly because the rest of the kids kind of caught wind that, oh, well, I can start selling candy too. So that kind of, uh, that was a very early uh, lesson in exclusivity. When I had the exclusive market, it was it was pretty good. And then once you had competition, it's like, oh, okay, anyone can go copy this idea. Um, so uh, comic books back then were 65 cents, and
Okay.
then just turning to 75 cents.
And was Golden Apple, was that your?
I did shop at the Golden Apple. There was another one in a little strip mall, I think on Third or Beverly. It's next to a washing a
Laundromat.
laundromat right now.
Yeah.
And it was a dad and his kid, um, and those guys. I have a long-standing relationship with Golden Apple. Done business with them for years and know them well to this day. But I started out at that smaller comic book shop. I got more. Um, as a 13-year-old kid, I got more direct response. I had someone to talk to.
Sure.
I think at that age, at 13, I didn't get uh, a lot of what I wanted back from the Golden Apple at that time. That changed. That changed later as I got older, and I started to do business with them. But um, so basically, I would take orders from kids at school, and I would get on my bike and I would ride I don't know how far it was. I mean, it was a mile or two, and I would buy the comic for 65 cents or 75 cents, and I would sell it for $1. And that was like I had like a little delivery service in a way. And I was in public school until fourth grade, and then I went to a private school from fifth through eighth grade. So I was in a school with some more affluent kids whose
Mm.
parents who had some cash in their pocket but didn't have parents that would ever drive them to a comic book shop.
Okay. So this was
So
okay.
so I was definitely, experienced like, fulfilling this need, this hole in the market. It was like, and that extra quarter was like, it's like, wow, I just made a quarter. I rode my bike over here. It's pretty crazy.
And you'd go once a week and then deliver the orders?
It depended. I don't recall how often I actually went, but that went on for a while. There was a point at which the school clamped down on kids selling things,
Oh,
and
okay.
then there was a point at which you were just not allowed to bring collectibles or anything to school of any nature because there was
Was this because of you?
probably.
Okay.
I remember this kid on the bus who was a few years younger brought some of his dad's baseball cards, and I ended up trading him like a bunch of cards for some 50s. Like, uh, no, I think it was I think it was like a 59 Mickey Mantle, and that's the one with the circle. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And I remember getting called in the uh, principal's office, and he said like, you're gonna have to give that back. Like, so another lesson in like doing business with children, like if you're not 18, like it's not has no legal standing. So
And did you know like the value of that card when you were doing the trade, or did you just have a good idea that this was a good card?
we all had a Beckett price guide at the time where everyone
Okay.
knew the value. I don't
Okay.
think that I was like sinking my teeth into the kid, but I was definitely trading him. uh, I think it was comparable. I think the issue was more that was like the dad's Mickey Mantle card that the kid was trading to me, and like I can imagine how that call went when like you're the dad calling the principal saying like, you get my baseball card back, so
And So you're also collecting at this point?
Yeah, I'm pretty much collecting anything I can get my hands on. Um, it, Not a lot of meaning necessarily in the collecting. It's more of a quantity. I guess I started collecting stamps, and my
Mm,
parents were pretty supportive of that.
sure.
I remember them taking me to the stamp collecting store, and you know, they thought that this was like a good investment. Like, little did they know that if you've ever met a stamp dealer, what they do for postage is you get this collage of stamps, because if you go to sell them, mint stamps, like 99% of the stamps you sell them, they pay you under face value, right? It's kind of ridiculous.
Garbage.
Yeah, so stamps not worth a lot of money. Coins never really caught on. It's really when I hit um, baseball cards and comic books that really and that was kind of like the heyday. That was like right before the boom.
Okay.
And so I don't know. It just it those are the golden the golden years. Like, I mean, that was just the time where you could buy something for $1, and 6 months later you could sell it for 10. It just happened all the time. And I remember going into the closest card shop was down on Robertson. It was Beverly Hills Baseball Card Shop, which
That
I'm not sure
little
if,
little
yeah,
hole in the wall one.
I'm not sure if it's still there, but
It was there 5 or 8 years ago. I think it still might be there.
um, it's very hard for a baseball card shop to stay in business right now.
Hmm.
Card shops, through the eBay boom, always had to have higher prices than eBay, and then they had to start selling on eBay to make ends meet. But it's really for either the high-end collector that refuses to go online, they want someone to do the work for them, or you go in there to break packs, which is just gambling these days. So I'm going to spend $10 on this pack, and it's going to either be worthless, or I'm going to pull out a $500 card, kind of thing.
So there still are $500 new cards,
Sure.
limited. So they limit them all up, and then there's
Yeah,
magical cards.
autographs,
Sure.
multiple signed autographs. Like, sometimes there's cut autographs where there's, like, a Lou Gehrig cut signature, like,
Got it.
embedded in the card. And then pieces of jerseys and bats and balls, and uh, most of that's not that interesting. But um, all of this was also a lesson in the long-term value of things, because if you followed this, you realize that 99% of baseball cards end up being worthless, right?
Hmm.
When stuff comes out and there's like 20 rookie cards, and everyone's 30 rookie cards, everyone's buying all those rookie cards, and someone does well that week and everything's going up, but long term, one of them turns out to be a superstar and a potential Hall of Famer, and that card keeps rising, and the rest just go down and just become garbage like everything else. So,
Was there a point at which you realized that?
um that took a little while to sink in, into my late teens.
Okay.
Same thing with uh, comic books. I think it was the 91 National Convention in Anaheim.
Okay, so the national travels all around the country, and then it
It
was
was
it
in it was in Anaheim,
in
and it
'91.
and the promo cards were huge, right? And I still, like, sometimes in a collection I get this set of these, like, Looney Tunes, you know,
Yeah.
cards with, like, it's like a
Oh,
Nolan
such
Ryan,
garbage.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
Those were selling $10-$20 per card, and they would hand
Ah,
it to you for free, and then people are outside selling. And I was trying to get as many as I could, thinking, like, hey, this is value, like, this is not understanding the concept of a bubble. And then I realized, later on, if I had just sold all of those cards, I would have walked away with $1,000. Why do I need to keep this? Nothing special about this. This is like, it's trying to, like, and it's hard today too to separate hype from actual value. It might be the same thing. I don't know.
Is there anything that you saved from these early teen years of yours that you still care about, that you still sort of look at and go, my God, I'm glad I bought this then, and I have this now, and or because did did you sort of lose the emotional attachment to this stuff, or did you ever have was where do your emotions sit in all of this?
Um, I have very little because I've gone through so many different phases.
Hmm.
So the baseball cards got sold off. I was selling baseball cards. I became a player collector, um, which that means like you focus on one player.
Mm,
I was
okay.
collecting Roger Clemens at the time, and I think I enjoyed following his career. And it just kind of wound up in this circle of people who are all collecting him. And then I've obviously I started selling my extras, and then all of a sudden I'm in business selling those cards. Um, but eventually that just uh, it, it just became so onerous because the companies would just keep pumping out new cards every year and more limited, and then it just became an issue of like how much money do you want to spend or how much money do you want to waste. I would say that I learned everything about collectibles that I use on a daily basis in consulting with artists and creators of collectibles from baseball card and comic books. So that is for sure where my education came from, and that was worth every penny. But you know what I ended up getting for all of it, like I mean, I figured that I spent, I don't know, 150, 200 grand between 1986, no, yeah, between 1986 and I don't know, 22 years later,
1986.
maybe like, so maybe over a period of 20 or 22 years, something like that.
Okay, so 1986 to 2006,
Maybe, maybe that's
and
when, and maybe I got like 40 grand for everything, selling it
this
all
was
to a dealer.
this was all Roger Clemens.
Yeah, yeah. I had the largest collection in the country, like, um, but I sold at the right time because if I'd waited, I would have gotten nothing because because then he had like the steroid scandal, and then just that all just
Nothing.
that all just went away. So, are there things that I no everything there are things along the way that I have kept, but the stuff from the very early years, um, no. Even when I was doing Star Wars, I was living at home with my mom, and I sold my vintage Star Wars collection, all my carded figures, and I got about double book at the time.
Okay.
Um, and that's how I sold that collection. That's how I put a down payment on a house. So basically lived at home until I was 28, and then I moved out and got a house.
Okay. So
So let me just go back
sure,
to that.
sure.
So there are some things I've gone back and so now I don't, let's say there's a point at which I don't have any carded Star Wars figures. I kept one of each vintage figure.
Loose.
Most of the vintage figures that I have are stuff that I got in my late teens.
Okay.
But I would upgrade, and then I got all the whole set graded, and I was looking for 85. So everything that was an 80 I upgraded to an 85, and if I got a 90, that was really worth like too much money, so I sold that and downgraded to an 85 because why keep a 90? It's like that's too much and it's unsustainable. Like I'm not
Yeah.
collecting a 90 of everything. That's insane. And 95s, for those of you who don't know, just don't exist. Like
Okay.
it's almost near impossible. Like it's like 1 in 1,000. It's
Wait,
not a
this is
thing.
loose. This is loose
This is
figures.
loose.
Graded and
So
loose. Okay.
so as a someone who mostly sold wholesale, if I got in a Star Wars collection, invariably I would get a call from an agent of somebody who's looking for a set of Star Wars figures. So I did start to put away 12 backs. I would get them graded. If they came back in 85, I kept it. If it was less, I would sell it off. And so I am rebuilding a set of the original 21.
Right now you're working on that.
Right now. If I can get them affordably. And I have a dozen so far, 10 maybe. I don't know, something like that.
10 out of 20. Okay.
And because as I'm selling stuff wholesale, where most of the Star Wars collections that where I was buying that were coming in are going out, selling wholesale, for those of you out there in La La Land, like if it's a $10 toy, I'm selling it for $5.
Sure.
And that means if it's coming in the door, I'm probably paying $4. I'm working on a narrow margin. So if you have $1,000 toy that you paid $400 for, and then you're going to wholesale it out for $500, that didn't make so much sense. So I'd rather put that on the shelf and wait till I get the call and sell it, as close to full price as possible.
So you put a percentage of, so a decent percentage of the cream of the crop you would just shave off, put that away, for a later date.
Sure.
Give it some time.
Other things I've done is, I don't think I own anything Roger Clemens except for a bunch of the starting lineup action figures, which I called the car dealer up and he had a bunch of stuff in storage. I said, can I get all the loose ones? And I sent those to the Sucklord to customize when he's, was in his starting lineup phase. So, there's little things like that. But so it wasn't until Comic-Con 1993, I think, that's when I bought my first Star Wars painting.
Okay, let's not go into.
Okay.
We have way too much stuff that we haven't even begun to unpack.
Sorry.
No, I find your story very molecularly interesting. So right. I want to get to the primary things. So you have at what point do you have what you consider an inventory?
Around age 20. So
Okay.
I remember getting most of my vintage Star Wars figures back, and I got almost a complete set, and I bought them from my girlfriend at the time's brother.
So he had a childhood collection?
He had a childhood collection, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. He's like, oh, you want to buy it? Whatever. She hooked it up, and I had pretty close to a complete set. He kept them in nice shape, and that's the set that I slowly upgraded, as pieces would come in. And that's the same thing I did with my carded collection. That's why it was so good. Is that if grading had been around at that time, it just, you get a collection of 50 figures, you're just picking, you're just constantly upgrading. So after I sold my collection, it was, after, 10 years of upgrading kind of thing, a little less than that. I'm selling posters to the poster shop at the farmer's market.
Okay.
And that guy would
movie posters.
Movie posters.
That you're getting where?
I'll get to that.
Okay.
So that guy offers to pay me $1 per poster, across the board. Doesn't matter.
New stuff.
Anything.
Okay.
Anything I can get my hands on. And then I had this conversation with him because I remember this Bette Midler video store poster, and then I saw it in the store for $16. I'm like, I sold you that for $1. And then, he had to explain to me, it's like, yeah, but look at my inventory. I have thousands of posters. Yeah. I just paid you $100. I need to recoup my $100. And you just understand how different businesses work. If you're selling gold, then yes, you can pay a higher percentage all the time and make this much. And if you are buying thousands and selling this much, you have to have a higher margin. So I was hitting up, those were the days of video stores. And
Okay.
I just, would ride my bike around. Anytime I was in the car with my mom, we'd be in a new neighborhood. Hey, stop right there. And I would just run in it there. It's like, hey, you have any movie posters? And some people would sell them and some people would say no, but most of them, they just go in the back. They only have so much wall space and they're getting a poster for every freaking release that comes out. And then I just walk out with, a huge roll of posters and I take it to the farmer's market and here's my $55. Like, I mean, that was a sweet business while that one lasted. Um, and then for some of the smaller, so at the time, video store posters were considered worth less than theatrical posters.
Absolutely.
Um, but for a lot of the smaller films, like if you had like a Canon film, I remember I had the Jim Cotta poster on my wall. You ever see Jim Cotta?
I've not seen it. I've heard of it.
It's amazing. Like, because like in the middle of the village, there happens to be this thing like a gymnast horse, and he's spinning around like killing all the ninjas. But if it was a small enough movie, they wouldn't have the budget to have a video store only poster, so you'd get the theatrical poster. And then movie stand-ups too, like
Stand-ups,
yeah.
yes.
So I would try to, and I remember just having ridiculous, temporarily, like, like mom would come home, like, what's going on? And, I'd have like, this life-size, like Tom Selleck with Paulina Poroskova over his shoulder. Like, I was like, what is this? And eventually, I'd sell it. Okay. So for some reason, the other poster thing dried up and I figured I would take a roll of posters to the shops on Hollywood Boulevard.
Mm.
Um, so I think I was walking into Hollywood Book and Poster, and those guys are used to buying wherever their backdoor deals. Like they get a roll of whatever new release comes out from whoever, the printer, the studio, or however they get their stuff. And even if you walk in there with something that they're selling for $100, like same thing as the other guy, like I was like, would you pay me 50 for it? And they're like,
Not a
no,
chance.
they have a roll of 50 of them in the back. They don't want it. So as I'm walking in the store, on the corner there was some dude just screaming, just whatever. Like I don't know. I didn't know what that was about. So I offer the guys the posters. He's like, nah, he doesn't want them. And I start looking around the store, and this guy, apparently the guy outside who was having a freak out, he had a freak out because his cab left with somebody else.
Ah,
And so this guy, was a German guy, and his name was Wolfgang. Had a very high pitched voice. Hi, my name is Wolfgang. Like that.
Wolfgang, yes.
Um,
Oh dear.
and so he says, oh, can I see your posters, please? And he looks through my posters,
Uh,
and he says he'll buy my posters, for whatever it was, $20. I'm like, okay. He's like, but you have to give me a ride home because my cab left.
okay.
I had a car at this point. I have to be at least 18. I grew up, parents, impressing upon me, like, you don't talk to strangers. There's all these weirdos in the world, but um, it's a pretty scrawny dude, and I just look at him like I, I'm not like, I'm already 6'2" by then. I'm not like, you know, uh, a sportsy guy, but I just looked at this guy and just thought like, if there's a problem, I could probably snap him in half. Like, not really worried. So I'm still being careful, not like there are some alarm bells going off, but not was comfortable enough to get my $20 and give him a ride home. That was fine. It wasn't that scary. Um, and I'd never done anything like that, you know, in my life, like pick up a stranger, like that. I hadn't even been driving long enough to like, it's like, just don't talk to strangers. Like, I'm still like kind of in that mode. Um, so he says, what are you into? I said, oh, I'm selling Star Wars toys. I'm like into Star Wars. He's like, well, you're going to take me to Harry's house. I'm like, what? Who's Harry? Like, he's like, Harry have Star Wars everywhere. Like, okay, whatever. So, instead of just dropping him off, he says, you need to come in the house. Like,
Okay,
what?
so you've driven to his house.
It's not his house. It's
You've
Harry's
you've
house.
driven, which is where?
Uh, like Hancock Park, like Highland and Third, something around there.
Okay, so nice-ish.
Yeah, I wasn't. No alarm bells there either. So
Okay.
I walk into the house. He introduces me to Harry. Harry's this 70-year-old man who is a former toy dealer. His name was Harry Freidenberg. He was H&R Records. He was a huge dealer. If you went to, this is before my convention years, but if you went to any of those, what were those Star Trek called? Star Trek
Oh,
conventions called?
creation
The creation shows.
creation
So
cons.
he's the
Yeah.
dude who would have like 20 tables. He
Oh, one
was
of those
he
guys.
he
Yeah.
had every studio, every printer on payroll basically. He was bootlegging scripts. He made his own, like if you look in the Star Wars catalog, there's like stuff that is attributed, to him. And he was kind of retired. And he had, I mean, it's just in his living room. There were Star Wars land speeders and stacks of there was shit everywhere. And I was like,
And like all kinds of stuff, or just all Star Wars, or just like
uh,
everything.
heavy Star Wars. There was some Star Trek and some other stuff, but I mean, heavy, into Star Wars because at that time, that's when Star Wars closeouts were big, right? So
Oh,
right around, so Star Trek had been going forever. So yeah,
sure,
he'd have Star Trek inventory, but there was not a lot of Star Trek closeouts. Um,
sure.
so when uh, it, so I bought a few things. I was like, oh, how much is land speeder? How much is this? And I gave him my card, and I just said, hey, if you want to ever sell everything, just let me know.
And
So
wait, how old are you? You're 18?
I was in college, maybe 18, 19, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, and so one day, I just get the call, and he's like, you can have all of it. I'm like, okay, how much? He's like, $4,000. I'm like, okay. So, I go and I look at the stuff. There's his only thing he was keeping were the records because he had soundtrack albums from, so his garage was floor to ceiling with something like 10,000 soundtrack albums,
Okay.
starting at like 2001 all the way to foreign releases, and that stuff he was still selling pretty well. Vinyl was not my expertise, and he had other people that would come there and buy the vinyl from him. Um, and years later, I think most of that stuff ended up in Amoeba. When
Hmm.
if you had that stuff today, the way vinyl is going, I mean that's like $1 million inventory. But at the time, he did give
Hmm.
me all the Star Trek, the Star Wars albums. So
Okay.
like maybe that's like there was like 4 feet of shelf space devoted to Star Wars albums, like
Jeez. Okay.
sealed cases of story of Star Wars picture discs, like um, and so I just kind of begged my mom. I'm like, I need to borrow $4,000. And she's
So
like,
you had essentially zero of that money.
I had some money in the bank. I don't know how I got. I think I had to borrow that.
So you said, "Mom, this is the deal.
I said I'll pay you
Please."
back. This will come back. And to her credit, I don't know why. No, I had to have that money by that point. Um, I don't actually remember, but I don't think it's something I would have done without talking to her first. I remember there was some convincing that went on, and I'm not sure if it was convincing to borrow it or convincing to let me have my own money, or to, she was doing her job checking in just to make sure that
So she had to sort of okay the whole situation one way or the other.
And we had already converted the garage into a room that I was, working out of, and it housed, most of my stuff there. And I would say it's the first time I ever drove a U-Haul, and it was the big, like the 16-foot one, 20-foot. Took 3 full truckloads.
Oh my God.
And I mean, we're talking about full cases of Bradley talking alarm clocks. We're talking about reams of Factors posters, 500 Darth Vader Factors posters, like jewelry, cases of Star Wars umbrellas, bubble bath, trading cards, action figures, wrapping paper, stacks of lobby cards. He's the one who did, I don't know if you know about the trilogy poster. The trilogy poster is a very simple black and white poster that was a photographic print and had the Star Wars Empire and Jedi logo for 2 days in, I wish I could tell you what day it was, in like the late 80s, in 12 cities, where and ours was in, I think was in Westwood, where they played the whole trilogy in one day. And each theater got 2 posters. So the one in Westwood, 2. So the one in Westwood says, the Regency or Avco or whatever, and then the one in Toronto says whatever. Those posters were the most expensive posters. I remember Steve Sansweet always had one on his wall. But this is the guy who bootlegged the bootleg, so if you had one, and I got like, I don't know, 1,000 copies of it. Like it was insane. Scripts, and then a lot of the Star Wars dealers that I knew at the time that used to go over to his house to buy stuff, now they're like, you bought everything, and now they would have to come to me to buy the stuff. Yeah, it's really kind of that was mind blowing. So at that point I still wanted to own one of everything. Right. So the first thing I did was pull one of everything out for my collection, and then everything else is for sale. And that's when I met Lance Worth from Star Force Collectibles. He was set up at the shrine every month. Okay. All he had on his table were Star Wars stuff, and we never really got along. Maybe I bought a $5 toothbrush from him, at some point, but. It wasn't until, I said to him, hey, I have all of this stuff. Are you interested? And this is after recouping and paying the money back. I'd let him take probably 80%, 90% of what was left. And he gave me something like $20,000 credit at his booth. So for the next 4 or 5 years, I would go to the shrine every week, and I would leave with a truckload full of stuff. And he was tracking down everything. So if it was like Polish, trading cards or little stickers that were on cheese packages from Denmark, or whatever it was, like I was just, I'll take that, it's just.
And this is all original trilogy stuff? This is all okay.
Because this is the prequel's not even out yet. This is all, I would say like 93, 94, 95.
Okay.
And so I'm building this, this Star Wars collection. And then, I keep buying stuff. I start to actually sell stuff at antique malls.
Okay, so you start having a booth or a case. Where did you? So are you starting to set up at the shrine occasionally, or no?
Even at that age, with all that stuff, I knew I did not want to sell retail.
Really?
I was doing other stuff. I was in school. Like the idea of sitting at a convention and selling retail, was not interested in that at all. The antique malls were cool because, I could price the stuff and leave it there. They handled the sales, took their commission. minus their rent. I think at one point I had up to 5 places when it started. That the Antique Guild over on Venice and
Were
the
you at farmers market?
Yeah, what was that called? That was
Had some sort of name.
yeah, they had another one called the Westchester Fair, and then once Time Traveler in Culver City opened,
Time traveler.
Time Traveler was kind of like, because now I'm not just
Yeah.
one guy selling Star Wars stuff in the middle of a mall, and the person next to me are selling watches and Hummels and you know pottery or whatever. Like when Time Travel opened in Culver City, it was just a complete 100% toy mall, and that
Yeah,
was
that was different.
yeah. That I mean that went from having like 1 or 2 cases to having like 8 or 9 cases, like 3, 6. Yeah, I think I had 6 cases at one point.
You were in the back room though, weren't you? Or
No,
was you
it
were?
was right up in the front.
Huh. Okay. Hmm.
And then Big Lou's opened also in Culver City, and
I
I
didn't know
opened
that.
up there, and uh, Time Traveler ended up going belly up. Anyway, so that was nice because I could go out 1 day a month or 2 days a month, price stuff, and leave it there, and then then I'm just collecting checks from everybody, which is a nice thing to do.
You never really joined the circuit, or you were always sort of behind the scenes, other than the
It
malls.
it, it I recognized very early on that's not a good way to make money. Everyone I knew who was doing it was broke. Like if I showed up with a collection and I said, "Here, you could sell this for $1,000. Give me 500." Like they couldn't afford it. Like
Huh.
those dealers on the circuit are broke. Like they do not have the capital to even buy good stuff. Like it's always, I'm still selling to these guys when they come over to the warehouse to pick through collections I have, and it's brutal. Like there's the guys from Puzzle Zoo, they just told me early on, like, they make their money selling Monopoly games. And if you're selling collectibles, like no one is getting rich selling collectibles. Like there is not enough inventory for you to turn over enough times to do anything more but, survive. And
Hmm.
then Puzzle Zoo became my mainstay, even as I started designer toy distribution. Puzzle Zoo was I was their number one vendor for many years. Um, and I was doing his liquidations, stuff he couldn't fit on the floor. And I would just take a truckload of stuff to Frank and Sons. And, he'd say, yeah, I need $1 each. I'd sell everything $2 each, whatever it was. Like, it was just always, just always hustling. And then ultimately got to the point where uh, their back end system I had installed here at the warehouse, I could check inventory, price anything that I wanted, just price it, send it to the store, and they would pay me, the wholesale price of whatever I priced it at. And I had pretty much free reign to do whatever I wanted. And I didn't go crazy. My goal was to move through as much product as possible. I mean, I guess I could price something higher if I wanted to, but then if it sat a long time, they'd give me a funny look, like, "What's going on here, dude?" Like that kind of thing. Um, but that was a very interesting business because I was taking product from collectors.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes it was not, there's already a new thing. There's already the 15th Darth Vader out. Well, the guy with the first and second Darth Vader, is selling that back. And if I did a convention, nobody wants that,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if I wholesale that back to retail, you walk into a retail store and you see not only the brand new Darth Vader, but the 5 before it. He basically said he would take a peg full of any Star Wars figure. And so that was my goal. Like, so it was just basically, that was my business model, was basically buying collections. And at the time, no one was buying. All the other dealers are broke. So it's like
Sure.
everyone, if you called the Golden Apple, you said, "Hey, I have Star Wars collection." They called up. You called Meltdown. It called up. You called Big Lou's. You called Puzzles. You called any place, like, talk to Dove. Like, so for a while there, it was, now I don't have as many people referring people to me as, now I make up a little postcard and I hand it out, buying toys, that kind of thing. Like that, I hand out 1,000 postcards before, uh, you know, before, a collection walks in. And then even places now like the Golden Apple, right? If you're a comic shop, you have to sell on eBay. Like everyone is selling on eBay. Puzzle Zoo, had to have an online presence, right? So at some point it starts making sense for them just to buy it and sell it themselves. That never happened for Puzzle Zoo because they didn't know how to buy something that's 20 years old.
Sure.
I had to take it and clean it and price it and research it and put it in there. And and then, he went from one store to 2, 3, 4, up to 5 stores at one point. At one point, I'm supplying 5 stores of product. So now dealers are coming to me like, oh, I have 500 extra figures. Do you want these? I can't sell them. And then, that stuff just, now I'm buying stuff to sit on it, right? I'm buying 500 Jar Jar figures, right? And I'm sending, I'm sending 8 into each store. And then every week I'm looking, I sold 3 here, I sold 2 there, sold 1, replenish kind of thing.
And you're still doing that today?
Not anymore. That stopped last year.
That stopped last year.
It did. So Puzzle Zoo. So Star Wars collections that come in right now, are sitting right here in my warehouse, and waiting for Star Wars Celebration. I was waiting for it to come back to LA. I was gonna do Chicago like whenever 1 or 2 years ago, and just decided like, the way I sell things at Star Wars Celebration is I go there with a truckload of stuff, and my goal is to come home with nothing.
Okay.
Right. So even what I'm doing, I'm trying to sell wholesale, like at a retail convention, because everyone else is bringing their best stuff, charging as much as they can, selling 10 or 15% of their inventory, and then thinking that they're rich because they still have all of this stuff, and I want to have nothing.
So you're going to, whatever celebration you next go to, you're going to roll in there and everything's going to be $10 or less. And
there might be something for $1,000, but the eBay price is going to be $1,200.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's like,
oh, I see what you're saying.
But I'm still, in the amount of business that I do before the show opens to other dealers is also kind of insane. Because people just come around, like, I want to take nothing home.
Okay, so you will have all price points. It's just that your price points every one of them will beat eBay, and if you're selling to a dealer, you'll even beat, you'll even give them a better price.
Correct. I mean, I don't sell on eBay myself. I have someone who can list stuff on eBay for me. You still lose like at least 30% just between paying the person and fees, and if it sells for under $10, like, you just get to keep it. Like, it's not even, so it's not viable unless I have something that can really get a lot of money. Or the right things for eBay, unfortunately, are just something just very weird that no one has seen before, that has no track record, that you just look at, oh, here's a weird promo item that no one has. I'm sure there's a collector that wants this. You just price it at $100 and you just leave it there. And then a year later, someone stumbles on it and they're like, oh, that's amazing. I've never seen this before. Yeah, it's like, yeah, well, duh. Like, and then they pony up.
And as you see it, is this aspect of your process, is it going to be viable for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years?
Well, there's so much other shit in there that we didn't unpack yet. Like,
no, I know. I'm just yeah. We've sort of gone through this whole sort of process, and I want to get to some other stuff, but I just want to want to look at this aspect of your business, which I think is an incredibly interesting, I mean, me as a dealer, I've always dealt everything directly. I don't wholesale anything. Everything I sell, but I also try to almost exclusively deal in stuff that is, one of a kind, two of a kind, very limited. Anything else, sure, I just try and.
But you are also so specialized and know all of the people. Like, I remember coming to your house, like, years ago, and you held up this one little file box and you said, "This is the best candy box collection in the entire world."
It was.
And it's like, it's like every time you needed money, you just dip into the box. And it's like, oh, $500 here, $2,000 here. And then, and you knew
I wish there was more of those 2000s, but I think probably every candy box in that box sold for $100 to $500. Every, little boxes that were this big.
But the difference is that you knew all of the crazy people.
Right? There's a super limited amount of people
that wanted that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And generally in those kind of situations, there's one or two people that really want the stuff. And when you get to the third and fourth person, like, it gets a little harder to sell.
Yes. Yeah.
Like the big fish, the whale that, like, he just wants everything. He will spend all the money. And then once he has it, then going to the second guy, maybe. And then the third or fourth, it's like, hey, $50 maybe, it's like, it gets tough.
There's definitely things like that. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't we, let's sort of call this part 1 of our discussion, and okay. We'll pick up with some other good stuff with part 2. Thanks, Dov, and we'll see you again real soon.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, well, that ends part 1. In part 2, we're going to see Dov as he moves into a more distribution-y phase, where he digs into the world of art toys and sort of plays a central pivotal role in making them a really important thing in our culture. So stay tuned and look for that next episode. It'll be coming out soon.